Single-page applications are the way to go if you want to build state-of-the-art web applications. But if you look around, there are so many big frameworks out there that just seem to take ages to learn. Let me tell you something. You don't need a framework like Angular to build single-page apps. Plain JavaScript and jQuery do the trick, and more importantly, you have to build a fast and reliable backend. And that's what you will learn in this course. The single-page app you will build in this course is a simple shopping list application that uses every CRUD operation with HTTP requests, calling a RESTful web service using Web API 2, which saves your data persistently in a SQL Server database. So make yourself ready to learn some jQuery, HTML5 and CSS for the front end. And considering the backend, we will use Microsoft's ASP.NET Web API 2 for our REST service and Entity Framework with code-first migration to communicate with the database. On top of that, you will learn how to publish your single-page app with Internet Information Services, or short IIS, on a Windows server so that everyone can access your new single-page application. I'm Patrick, and I have built several web applications professionally as freelancer and employee, and over the years I've learned so many things that you just don't have to do. I want to save you time, because in my opinion it's better to know the crucial and most important parts quick, so that you can get your single-page app out there in no time. Sounds good? Let's get started. Hi there, welcome and thank you very much for joining the single-page application with ASP.NET and jQuery hands-on course. I'm Patrick and I will guide you through every lecture. You will see me writing the actual code and explaining every detail so that you will be able to write a single-page application by yourself with jQuery, Web API and Entity Framework. Now let's have a look at the complete package of what you will learn throughout this course. The single-page application we will build together is a simple shopping list app. The user of our app will be able to create its own shopping list, add items to the list and manipulate these items by checking them off or deleting them. To access the items the user has created on her computer, she can call the corresponding shopping list ID in the URL. That way, the list can actually be used in the grocery store from a smartphone. Our application won't win any design awards. That's because learning web design is not the goal of this course. But we will change a little bit of the design so that you get an idea of how cascading style sheets can be implemented in the application. And this already leads us to the first big section. The whole course is organized in 4 main sections. The first one will cover everything front-end or client related. You will write the HTML, CSS and also the JavaScript code for your single-page application. This means that by the end of the first section, your single-page application will already work, but unfortunately no data will be saved persistently and you won't call any web services. It's the front-end logic that will be ready for the following sections. In the next section, you will build the web service with ASP.NET Web API. Here you will learn to write the HTTP requests, get, post, put and delete, and how to call them with jQuery and Ajax from the front end. Communication between front end and back end is key in these lectures. Now, although you will learn all about the CRUD operations, meaning create, read, update and delete, persistence will be covered in the subsequent section. In this section, you will finally learn how you can save all the shopping lists and items persistently in a database. We do that with the help of Entity Framework and the so-called code-first migration. After these 3 sections, you will be able to build your single-page application from start to finish completely by yourself. But it doesn't stop there. To be able to build a real-world application that can be accessed in the web, you have to know how you can publish your app to Internet Information Services on a Windows server. Also, you might want to use an actual SQL server for your database. This is covered in the last section. Okay, so far our roadmap, but first let's start small. Let me explain what a single-page application actually is and how it works in the next lecture. So what actually is a single-page application, or in short, a SPA? Well, in essence, a single-page application is a single page or a single website, as the name implies, that you load within your browser. When this website has finished loading, you stay at this single page the whole time you're working with the data given by this website. This means when you click on a form or on a button, you actually don't jump to a new page. Instead, the content you see on this page will be replaced by new content, without leaving the current website. This provides a more fluid user experience, similar to a desktop application, and usually works faster because you just load a small part of the page instead of the whole thing. To make this clear, let's use our shopping list application as an example. We start the web application and see an input field and the button to create a new list. When we do that and hit the button, the content of our application has changed. But we actually did not jump to another page. You don't even see a loading icon in the upper left corner of the browser. Let's do it again and pay attention to the address bar of the browser. When we click Create, the browser did not seem to do anything, but the content has actually changed. Now, how is this done? There are different ways to change the content of the current page. For example, a solution for small applications with little content, like our shopping list app, would be to simply load the complete HTML of a page and make particular parts, for example divs, of this page invisible or visible, just as you need it. For bigger applications, or to reduce data load in general, it's better to load HTML parts when you need them and replace these parts with the existing code in a container. Here is a short example. As you can see, two divs are in this HTML snippet, but one is hidden with the CSS statement display none. Now when we want to see the other div, we can just display it and hide the other one. Quite simple and works like a charm, but as mentioned, be careful with bigger projects. If your single page app will have lots of content, it does not make sense to put all the HTML code on this page. This would increase the loading time dramatically, hence you might lose lots of visitors. And it would be a lot harder to maintain your application. So let's have a look at the next example. You see a div which will be used as a container. We have the same content as before, but when we want to change the displayed content, we actually remove the HTML code in the container and replace it with the new one. That way, the HTML code is only loaded when needed. But let's dig a bit deeper. You're here to learn something, so let's call the HTML replacements by their proper name. Have a look at this HTML code and the resulting page. We can also display it like this. Since HTML is a so-called markup language, well, it stands for Hypertext Markup Language, the code is always organized in a tree structure. The first node or root node in this tree is the div container, then we see the input field, the button, and an unordered list with its corresponding list items. All these little parts are described as objects. There is even a convention how to represent and interact with these objects. It's the Document Object Model, or short, the DOM. And the tree you see here may also be called a DOM tree. So now you know these content replacements a single page application does are actually manipulations to the objects of the DOM tree. The changed appearance of a single page app usually is the result of a web service call. The user clicks a button, JavaScript is used to communicate with the server sends back the result, and then JavaScript is changing our page. To make things simple at first, we won't use the actual web service call in the next section of this course. Instead, we will manipulate the DOM directly with JavaScript or jQuery. However, in the subsequent section, we will cover the whole web service process by using Web API to finally build and use the service. For the most part of this course, you will only need Visual Studio and a browser. In all the lectures, you will see Visual Studio 2017 Community Edition and Google Chrome. The Community Edition of Visual Studio is available for free and can be downloaded on the corresponding website. The same holds true for Google Chrome. We use Chrome because we need the developer tools of the browser. If you are familiar with Firefox or any other browser and its developer tools, you can also choose that browser. If you have no idea what developer tools in a web browser are, don't worry, I will explain everything when we need them, of course. As soon as we cover Entity Framework and publishing your web application, we will also need Microsoft SQL Server Express Edition, which is also available for free. But it's not necessary to download it now. Visual Studio and Chrome are the only tools we need so far. One last important hint though, when you install Visual Studio 2017, make sure to check ASP.NET and web development during the installation so that you'll have all the libraries available when we need them. Welcome to the first section where you will write actual code. In this section you will learn to build the client or frontend respectively. You will build the website with HTML, add some styles with CSS, and even implement the logic of your single page application with jQuery. This means that by the end of this section, your single page app will already work, but only offline, and the changes you have made to your shopping list will be removed after you refresh the page. But don't worry, you will learn how to save all changes persistently later on, of course. For now, let's start with the front end of the single page app. Let's start our project by creating a new web application. In Visual Studio, we go to File, New Project, and then from the templates we choose Visual C#, Web, ASP.NET Web Application. And since we are going to build a shopping list app, we can call this project Simple Shopping List, for example, and then click OK. And as you can see here, there are many templates you can choose from. Additionally to that, you can select if you want to use ASP.NET MVC, Web API, and you can even activate individual authentication with ASP.NET Identity. Apart from that, you also see the single page application template here that Visual Studio provides for us, but we won't use this template in this course. Instead, we will simply build an empty web application, but also add Web API so that we get all the preparations and references we need for our web service. So empty web app, Web API, now click OK. Okay, now after the project has finished loading, make yourself familiar with the file structure you see here in the Solution Explorer. You see a bunch of files and folders here, but try not to get confused. I'll explain the details when we need them. For now, it's already interesting to know that these two folders here, models and controllers, will be used by the Web API, since the web API uses the model view controller pattern, which will be explained in the corresponding section. For now, the next thing we want to do is add an HTML file. So we right click the project and then go to add and then HTML page, and we simply call it index.html. Okay. Now, as you can see, Visual Studio has generated some code for us, and now we want to test if this web application already works. To do that, we move our cursor between the body tags and write something like test here. Now we save our file, and then we go to File, View in Browser. And as you can already see here, Google Chrome is mentioned in this menu entry. That's because Chrome is the default browser on this machine. So when we click it, Google Chrome will start. And you can already see that everything works just fine. Great, so far the project is ready, and now we can start to write some HTML and CSS. As you already know, a single page application can already have all HTML or DOM elements on its actual page, but several parts might just be hidden. In our shopping list web application, we will have two different views. The first view simply shows a text field for the name of the new shopping list and a button to create this new shopping list. The second view will display the just created list, and you will have the possibility to add new items, of course. For now, we will start with the first view, and the first thing we will do for that is simply create a new div for that matter. So between the body tags, we remove this test string here and start by adding a new div like that. So this will be the first view. And what we want to have in this view is a title of the application, a text field where we put in the name of the new shopping list, and a button to create the list. So we start with a simple header like that, and our application is called simple shopping list. Okay, then the next thing would be an input field with type text. Again, it will be the name of the shopping list we want to create, so we can also add a placeholder, something like new list. And last not least, of course, a button to create our shopping list. Okay, now save that, and let's have a look how this will look in the browser. This time we don't have to use File, View in Browser. We can simply switch to Chrome and just reload the page. Well, it's functional, I'd say, but it's not very pretty. So let's change that by adding some CSS. We go back to Visual Studio, and this time we add a CSS file, again by right-clicking the project, and then go to Add, and then Style Sheet. And we call this file styles CSS. Okay. Now, before we can actually use this cascading style sheet file, we have to make sure that our HTML page knows the CSS file. We can simply do it by dragging and dropping the styles CSS from the Solution Explorer into the head tags of the HTML page. Okay, great. Now the page knows the file, and now we can actually write some CSS code. Here in the body part of the CSS file, we change the overall appearance of the page. So for example, if you want to change the background color of our page, we can do this here and maybe give it a hex code like this one, which is simply some kind of blue. And we can also change the font of the overall page and set it to Arial, for example. Give the text another color like white, and also change the alignment of the text and set it to center. Okay, these are only some tiny changes for now, but again, let's have a look. We go to Chrome and reload the page. Okay, much better now, I think. And now let's start to add the second view. Again, we start by adding a new div, and again we have an input field and a button and of course a header. So let's go back to Visual Studio and make the changes. So similar to the first view, we add another div like that. We also have a header, but this time it will be the title of the list. So maybe something like new list. And again, an input text field. And we add a placeholder, but it's a new item in this case, because in this text field we will enter the name or the title of the item we want to add to our shopping list. And again, we need a button that will be used to add this item. And now in this second view, we will actually display all the items of our shopping list, so we can start doing that just for the sense of creating a mockup. In this case, we will start with an unordered list and add some list items to see the results. So maybe we need a salad, not salda, a salad. We also need a classic milk and maybe some tomatoes. Okay, one last thing we have to add is, well, we want to be able to delete the shopping list items and check them off. So for every single list item, we need buttons to do that. So in between the li tags, we add a button, D for deletion, and another one like C for checking this off. And we can copy that and put it into the other list items. Okay, again, this is just a mock-up. Of course, later on we will replace the list items with the real items we want to create. But for now, let's have a look. We go to Chrome again and reload the page. Well, it kind of works, but the second view looks a bit strange. As you can see here, these bullet points for the single list items, the buttons look strange here, and of course we see both views at the same time. I'd say we have to change that. So first, let's cover the design of the second view with adding some new CSS. So we go back to our style CSS. And this time I start with the unordered list. And as you can see here, for the beginners, this UL is the same unordered list I use here. So if I write down the UL tag in the CSS file, it makes changes to the UL DOM elements of our page. Okay, now what I want to do is first remove the bullet points, and I can do that by changing the list style type and set it to none. Another thing I want to do is give the whole list a maximum width of 300 pixel, and then also a little margin change like that. Okay, the next thing would be the single list items. We will give them a minimum height like 20 pixel. Also, we change the alignment of the text, set it to left. We change the background color of our list items. Also the color of the text, which will be some dark gray. Also some changes in the padding and margin bottom, so that there will be a bit space between the single list items. Okay, and the last thing I want to add is the buttons in the list items. As you can see here, I use the li, and directly after that the button. This means this style changes only are only used for the buttons in between the li tags. And what I want to do with these is changing the float and also the margin like that. Okay, so again, we changed the appearance of the unordered lists, of the single list items, and the button in the list items itself. So let's save that and have a look again. Reload the page. Well, okay, now we won't win an award with this, of course, but I think the list looks better than before. Again, we will replace the list with real items later, of course, but for now the next thing we should do is remove this second view. Now, how can we do that? There is also a possibility to do this with style sheets, actually, but we won't do that in the CSS file. We will add the style in the HTML element or the DOM element itself. So again, this is our first view, and this one is the second view we don't want to see in the beginning. So what we can do, we can go directly into the div tag or the div element and add a style. And this time use the property display and set it to none, so that the whole div and the content in the div is invisible. We go back to Chrome and reload the page. Perfect. So now we have our correct entrance. And actually already the next thing we have to do is adding some logic or intelligence with JavaScript or jQuery. Before we start writing some JavaScript code, we will add jQuery to our project. If you don't know it already, jQuery is a powerful JavaScript library which makes many JavaScript functionality easier, especially when it comes to browser compatibility. So for example, you write something for Chrome which doesn't work in Internet Explorer, and which is not that uncommon, to be honest. And yeah, if you use jQuery, then it will handle these issues for you. Additionally to that, you can access DOM elements with jQuery quite faster than with plain JavaScript. So let's add jQuery now. There are many ways to do this, of course. You could go to the homepage of jQuery and download the library and put it into your project. But I think the easiest way to add the library is with the NuGet package manager. So we access the manager with tools, NuGet package manager, and then manage NuGet packages for solution. And here you can already see the installed libraries we have, but we want to browse for a new one. You can already see jQuery down here, but just in case you don't see it, you can look for jQuery, hit enter, and that already is to this date in version 3.1.1. So we want to install it for our simple shopping list project. Hit install, and that's okay for us. And as you can see, a new folder was added for us, the scripts folder, where we can see all the JavaScript files, in this case all the jQuery files. It comes in different versions. There's the whole library and also a minimized version here, and we will use the minimized one because it just has a lower size. So the next thing we have to do is make this library available to our page, and similar to the CSS file we created in the last lectures, we will simply drag and drop the jQuery library in between the head tags of our HTML page. So now our web application already knows jQuery, and now the next thing we have to do is add a file for our code we will write, because we don't want to change any code of the library here. So we right click the scripts folder, go to add, and this time JavaScript file, and we will call it app.js. Okay. Again, we have to make it available to our app. So drag and drop it here, save it, perfect. Okay, now let's go to our app.js. Now, to test this, there is one simple way to actually do this. With jQuery, there is a built-in function that will be called when a document has finished loading. So for example, if we press reload in Chrome, and then it takes a few seconds or milliseconds to load the page, and when everything is done, this function will be called. And we will use this function to simply write some kind of text into the console. So let's do this now. If you don't know jQuery, we start with the $, which is the jQuery identifier. So this means that we want to use a function of the jQuery library, and then we can access the document, which is our page in essence, and this document has a built-in function called ready. With that way we can already call it, but nothing would happen. So what we have to do here is give this ready function an argument, and we will give him a new function like that. And then we want to access the console and simply write something like ready. Console info just means that we want to write some text into the console. We could also use console log or console error, then the text would be written in red color, but I'm used to use info here. So again, we access jQuery with the $, then access the document. With ready, we call a function, you see it here, specify a function to execute when the DOM is fully loaded, so when the page has finished loading, and then this is our own function, which will simply write ready into the console. Okay, now let's save it. And again, let's go back to Chrome. And this time what we want to do is we want to open the developer consoles. We can do that by pressing F12 on our keyboard, or go to the menu, More Tools, and then Developer Tools. And you can see here that the console is already open. And now what we have to do is simply reload the page. And sometimes it's the case that Chrome or any other browser loads a cached version of our JavaScript code. In that case, we can simply right click the refresh button and say empty the cache and hard reload. Let's do this now. This was fast, and as you can see here, everything works just fine. Ready was written for us, and if you want to see how this looks in the code, you don't have to actually go into Visual Studio. You can also click the app.js here, and there you see the same code we have written in Visual Studio. Okay, so everything works just fine. Now let's move on. And in the next lecture, we start writing code to create a new shopping list. Okay, our setup works so far. When we have a look, we have an HTML file here. We have some CSS for the pretty part, and also the JavaScript file for the actual logic of the web application. So what we have to do now is write some more logic to create a new shopping list and add items to it. Creating a new list should be done with the create button here in our HTML, this one. When you click it, the whole div here should be hidden, and the other div, this one down here, should appear. Also, what we want to do is we want to change the content of this header tag here. This should be the title of the list we put in here into the input text field. Okay, I'd say let's do this now. We go to the app.js, and we write a new function. Let's do this up here. New function, and we will call it create shopping list. Okay. Now, since we will always have one specific shopping list open, we can define this list globally and access this list in every single function we will create in the future. So outside of the create shopping list function, we declare the current list. We do this with var current list, and for now it's simply an empty object. Now we can go back to the create method down here. In here, the current list we have defined globally will get a new member, which is the name of the current list, like that. Now the problem is we have to give it an empty name in this case because we don't know how to access the HTML element where the name was written. So to be able to access the element, we first have to go back into the HTML file and give this input text field here an ID. You can simply add one this way. Call it shopping list name. And with that ID, we can access the field back in the JavaScript. And again, we will use jQuery to do that. We start with the $, and then use the number sign or hash to tell jQuery, hey, I want to access a DOM element with a specific ID. And we use the same ID we have entered before, like that. And we want to have the value of the input text field, and there's a function called val, like that. And that's it. We already have our name. Okay, now actually the next step would be to call a web service and send this new list to the service. The service would give us an ID back, and then when we get the response of the service, we would show this newly created list. Of course, we will do that in the corresponding section later on, but for now, let's prepare this way without an actual web service call to get a feeling how things may work. So here would be the actual web service call, but we will just pretend we called the web service and implement some offline logic here. So we have the name of the list. The next thing we want to do is display the name of the list on the website and actually remove the div where we have created the new list, so the first view, and we want to show the second view with the title of the list. And again, we can use jQuery to get the elements we need, but first we have to add some IDs into the HTML code again. So we need IDs for our first view because we want to hide this view and we need a way to identify it. And I'd say this is the create list div or view. You can choose any name you want. And after this ID, we add IDs to the second view. Which is the shopping list div. And also this header here needs an ID because we want to change the content of this header to the title, to the shopping list title. And the last ID I want to set is the ID for the unordered list, which is in essence the shopping list items. Okay, so these are all the IDs we need so far. Now we can use jQuery again to get the elements. In this case, the h1 header here. So we go back to the app.js. And what we want to do is we want to set the name. So we will use jQuery to, now you know it, access the shopping list title. And this time we want to change the whole HTML and set it to the current list name. Next, we want to access the unordered list. Again, this is the unordered list with the ID shopping list items. In essence, we can copy the ID here, access it here like that, and empty it so we won't see any items first. And the last thing we want to do is we want to hide the first view and show the second one. So the first one was the create list div, and we can simply call hide. And the second view is the shopping list div, and we can show it like that. Okay, so just to recap, we set the name of the current list to the input field of the first view, shopping list name, which is here. And then we change the HTML of the shopping list title of the second view, which you can find here, the shopping list title. And then we also empty the shopping list items, this one here. And then we hide the first view and show the second one. This is the first view here, the whole div, and down there the second one. Okay, so far so good. The last thing we have to do now is actually call this create shopping list function. We can copy the name, save the file, and then go to the HTML, and this create button here can have events. For example, one event is when the user clicks the button, and we can access it with onClick and simply tell the button to call the create shopping list method when it was clicked. Okay, that's it. I'd say let's have a look. We save the file. Now we go back to Chrome and just make that a bit smaller, and now we reload the page. Okay, so far nothing happened, that's okay. And now I say this is my new list, create it, perfect, everything works just fine. So I entered the name, the header was changed, the header of the second view, and the first view was hidden. And now the second view is available, and you can also see that there are no list items left anymore because this is a new list, so we want to enter new items to it. Okay, everything works just fine, but you can already see one, well, kind of disadvantage of single page applications. If you want to go back and create another shopping list, you can't click the back button of the browser. Instead, you have to click the reload button, because this is the initial state of our application. So if I reload the page, again I see the first view, I can enter something like, I don't know, second list, and click create. Everything works just fine, but again I can't go back. Now of course there are ways to fix this, and we will cover these ways in a future lecture, but for now we just reload the page and we're good. Now to give you some more detail of what actually happens underneath, we can simply inspect the items of the DOM. Just right click any DOM element of the page and click inspect. And now you see our code we have written in Visual Studio. Here is the shopping list title and here the shopping list div, so our second view. And here you see the first view, and you can see that also here's a style change. jQuery gave it a display none. The same thing we did with the second view initially. So when we reload the page, things have changed again. Now we can see the first view, and the second view has this display none property. And when I say, well, shopping list and create it, as you can see, these properties have changed. Now here is no display none anymore, but here it is. So the first view was hidden by jQuery, and the second view is now visible because we said, hey, jQuery, show the div with this certain ID here. Okay. Now the next thing we will do is add items to the shopping list. Okay, now a shopping list is kind of useless without any items on it. So the next thing we want to do is adding items to the list. So we go back to Visual Studio, and similar to the create shopping list method, we add a new function. And this time we call it add item. Okay. Now what we want to do with this method is we want to create a new shopping list item with the name being the value from the input text field of the second view, kind of similar to the process of creating a new shopping list. And then we add this new item to an items array of the actual shopping list objects. But again, before we can do that, we have to solve some issues first. The input field has no ID, so let's go to the index.html and give this input field here, similar to this one, an ID. And this time we call it new item name. Okay. Now the next thing we have to do is we have to call the add item method. And since we are already in the HTML file, we can do it right here. Again, it's the onClick event. And when we click the add button, we call the add item method. Okay. Now in the create shopping list method in our app.js, right here, we have to initialize an items array of the current shopping list object. Let's do that now. We can simply do it like that. We call the current list and now give it an items array like that. Okay, so our current list now has its name and a list of all the items. Great. Now everything is ready to actually implement the add item method. Now this time we first create a new item object like that. And again, we give it a name similar to the shopping list. And this time the name would be the value of the new item name input field. And after that, we put the new item into the array or the list of the items of our current shopping list object. So the current list has now an items array, and with push, we can put the new item into the array. Now to test that already, we can do one thing. We can simply write the current list into the console, and I'd say we will do exactly that. So console info current list. Again, we created a new item. It's first an empty object, we give it a name, and then we push this new item into the array of our current list items. Okay. Save everything and go back to Chrome and reload the page. Let's give it a new name. We create a new list, my new list, hit create. And now I have to buy some milk, click add. And as you can see here in the console, the list is written down here. We can expand it and also see here is our items array with one item in it. Let's open that. We have an object and the name of this object is milk. Okay, perfect. So this whole logic works so far. Now, since we don't want to see our shopping list in the console all the time, we now have to add new elements to the DOM with every new item on our list. So let's go back to Visual Studio. Every item will have a title and also two buttons, one to delete the item from the list and one to check it off when you put this item into your cart. Now, for that matter, we will create a new method again, and this time the method we will create is called drawItems. Okay, now not only does this lead to a more readable code when we extend the code into another function, we also will need this drawItems function in other situations further on, for example when we want to load an existing shopping list, but you will see that later. So in this method, the first thing we want to do is empty the unordered list just to make sure there are no old entries visible, and we can already return that into a new list object. So we can do that like this. This is just a convention for this variable name that I know it will be a jQuery object. That's why I used the $sign here. Of course, you could call this variable just list, but since it's a jQuery object, I do it this way. And what we want to have here is the actual list we already have on our page. So the shopping list items list, but we want to empty it. So now we already have our unordered list element. Now the next thing is we want to go through the item array of our current list, and we will do that with a for loop. And then we build every necessary DOM element for every single item on the list. So first, the for loop. Goes through every item of the array. Okay, now to make things a bit easier, we just declare the current item first, which is of course the item of the items array with a certain index. And then we can already start by creating a new list item. Again, it's a jQuery object, and we can create the list item like that. This just tells jQuery, hey, create a new DOM element with this certain tag, in this case the list item, and we can already change the HTML of this item and give it the name of the current item. And also we can add a new attribute to it, and let's put that into another line. The attribute I want to add is the ID, and the value would simply be item and the current index. So attribute in this case takes two arguments. The first one, ID, is the attribute itself, what kind of attribute, and the second one is the actual value. Now we need two more things. The first one is the delete button. It's kind of similar to the list item. We can tell jQuery, hey, this should be a button, and we can already add the text of the button here, like that. And after that, we have to append this button to our list item element, like that. And then we also need a checkoff button, so we can copy this one here, change the text and also the name of the variable, like that. And the last thing would be to add the whole list item to the list, like that. Okay, Now just a short recap. We created the list first, and then we went through the whole items array of the current list, took the current item, and then created a new list item with a name and a new ID, and also added the 2 buttons to the list item. And in the end of the loop, we appended the list item to the whole list. Now the question may arise, why do we use a for loop if we only add one single item all the time? Well, we empty the whole list first, so it could be the case, of course, that there are more items on the list. So we need the for loop. And also we want to use this draw items method when we get, for example, a complete shopping list from the web service. And in that case, again, could be the case that there are more items than just one on the list. And that's why we use a for loop. Okay, now the last thing we have to add is calling the actual method draw items when we add a new item. So in the add item method, we call the draw item so that we will see the new item on our HTML page and not only in the console. Okay, I'd say let's save that and let's see how this looks in Chrome. We reload the page, create a new list, and now the classic I need some milk. And as you can see, not only we see the new item in the console, but also we see it on our HTML page. And now, of course, I can add another item like the salad. Click add, and now I have 2 items here. Perfect. Okay, and now as you can see, these check and delete buttons won't do anything, and that's what we will change in the next lecture. Okay, let's go back to Visual Studio. And now the first thing we should do is actually calling a method when the delete or check off button is clicked. Now for that matter, we changed the code of our draw items method a bit. Here you can see we just added the delete and check button. And now what we want to do is, similar to the other buttons, we add the onClick event and say when you click the button, you call a method which is called delete item with a certain parameter, and in this case it is the index, the current index of this for loop. Okay, and let's put this into the next line so we can read it a bit better. Button on click should call the delete item method with the corresponding index. Okay, and we can do exactly the same for our check off button. So we move it into another line, and here we paste the onClick, but of course we change the method, call it check item, but also with the current index. Okay, now the next thing, of course, we should do is implement these methods. So the first one would be function delete item. It takes the index as an argument. And what we will do here is quite simple. The current list has the items array, and we will just remove this item with a certain array from the list. Splice is the method that does exactly that. So we take the index of the argument and remove one item. And after that, we call the draw items again, so that we also see the result of deleting the item on our HTML page. And as you can see, this is another use of the draw items method, so it's good that we have extracted the method. Okay, so far the delete item method. Next would be the check item method. also takes an index as argument. And what we do here is we access the item first with the corresponding index. That's why we gave it an ID before, the drawItems method. And then we add a class to this item, which will be called checked. So what's a class? A class in this case is a CSS class. We did not create a CSS class before, so we will do this now. Just to explain that, the checkItem method, again with the, you know it already, with that identifier we access the DOM element that has this ID, so item and then underline and the index, and then with add class we will add a CSS class to that DOM element. Okay, now let's go to our style CSS and create the class. And again, just to recap, you've seen the UL, LI and so on tags here. This means that we will change the style of every item that is a list item, for example. But now we only want to change the style of any DOM element that has this specific class, which is called checked in this case. And what we will do is simply change the text decoration and set it to line through. Now this means that anytime we click the check button, the text of the list item will get a strike through. Okay, so we saved it already. Now we can go to Chrome and already check that. Reload the page, create a new shopping list and add milk, for example, and also salad. Now we can delete salad. See, it worked already. And now we can check off the milk. Perfect. This already works quite nicely, but there's one last thing that still doesn't work though. What happens if I click this button again? Well, we add the class all the time. Again, we can inspect this element and you see it here. Class checked was added to this list item. So if you did anything wrong, if you did a mistake, we can't undo this checking. So let's change that in the JavaScript code. We go back to Visual Studio and we have to make this method a bit bigger. First, we have to check if this element here also has a class called checked. If this is the case, we can copy the whole line. We don't want to add the class, we want to remove it again. Okay, and if not, we will add the class just as we did it a minute ago. Okay, now let's save this one again and let's have a look. Reload the page. Let's have a look here. And now we create the test and create a milk item. And now we see the item here. We check it, gets the class, and if we check it again, it will remove the class. Okay, so now we can add items, we can check them off and undo this, and we can also delete items. Now, of course, you might have already noticed that for every new implementation, we have to create a new shopping list. We have to reload the page, create a new list, and only then we could test to add items, check them off, and delete them. Well, to make things a bit more enjoyable, in the next lecture, you will learn how to get an already created shopping list so that we can start with this list right away and test all the implementations without the need to create a new shopping list every time. Okay, now how do we get an already created list? Let's say when everything works with the web service and the database, you create your list at home and then you're going to the grocery store and want to load your shopping list on the smartphone. The easiest way would be if you could just enter ID and then the ID of your list, for example, something like that. Now nothing would happen. It just loads the entrance of our single page application, but this would be a nice way to get a list from the service. We can also implement all the preparations for that offline and already test if this works. So what we have to do now is we have to look for this little string here in the URL. So let's go back to Visual Studio. We will go back to our ready function. And the first thing we have to do here is get the current URL. So the current page URL is the window location href. This will be the whole URL you see in the address bar of the browser. Then, as I already mentioned, we are looking for this little string here. So what we can do is we wanna get the, which will be the ID index of the shopping list. So with the page URL, we have a look for a string, which will be $ID equals. Now what does this line do? With index of, we can look for a certain string in another string, and then index of would return the position of this string. And if it didn't find the string, it will return -1. That's why we can check for -1 now. Now the ID index, if it is not -1, this means the user has entered something like the $ID and so on. And what we want to do then is we want to actually load the corresponding shopping list with a given ID. So we will call a method like get shopping list by ID, for example. Shopping lists by ID. And then we have to give this method the ID, and we can extract the ID of this whole string, of course. So we take the page URL, take a substring of that, and say, give me the index ID, the ID index, and add 4. Why is that? We have 4 characters here, the $ID and then equals, and after the equals sign will be the ID of the list. Okay, and now let's create the get shopping list by ID method. Takes the ID. And first, just to be sure, let's write the ID into the console. And now, since we don't have a web service and a database, we simply create a dummy shopping list to test all the things. So the current list will get a name, like mock shopping list. And of course also some items, which is a simple array. And the items are objects again, with a certain name like milk, and then just copy these 3 items, and maybe this time we want to buy cornflakes and strawberries. Okay, these are our items, this is the array. Okay, and now what we have to do is we have to show the shopping list with all the items, and we actually already did that, namely with the create shopping list method. Here what we do is we set the title of the current list, we empty the list, we hide the first view, and we show the second view. So in essence, we can extract that code. So maybe just write a new function here and call it show shopping list, like that. And then we can remove the code here, put it into that method, and here we just call show shopping list, like that. And then the next thing we have to do is also call the method here, show shopping list, and also draw all the items. Because with show shopping list, we just set the title of the list up here and empty the list, also hide and show the views, but the items are not visible yet, and so we have to also draw them here. Okay, now let's save that and also test it in Chrome. We reload the page and already see it works quite nicely, I think. We loaded a new shopping list with the ID 1. In that case, it doesn't matter which ID we enter here. We can also enter 10 or something like that. We will always load our dummy shopping list or the mock shopping list here. You see that we get the correct ID down here in the console, and we have all the items of the list. We can check them off, we can undo that, and of course we can delete our items. And still, if we remove the ID, we come to our normal entrance. We can create a new list and add new items. Okay, now this works. It will help us for future implementations when we use the web API and the database. For now, there's one last thing we should do on the front end, and this would be improving the usability. Now, to improve the usability of our shopping list web application, we should implement the following features. When the website has finished loading, like that, the cursor should be set into the text field, this one, for the new shopping list. And then when the user presses enter or return, the shopping list should actually be created so that the user has to use the mouse anymore to create the list. So, like that. And then the same should happen for adding new items. So when we created the list, the cursor should be set into the input text field, and then with enter we can create the new item and add it to the list. And the last thing would be, now you see it here, when I enter milk and click add, milk still stands in this input text field. We should change that, of course, too. So let's make changes now, and for that we go back to Visual Studio. Now in the document ready function, we add one line to put the cursor into the text field. The shopping list name element gets the focus. Easy as that. And directly after that line, we start to listen to every key press of the user in this text field. Now we can do that way. Shopping list name. We use the method key up, which means if any key was pressed on the keyboard, and with releasing this single key, this method then will be called. The method we will give this event right now. So with key up, we add a new function, and this function takes an argument called event. And the event object has a member or a property which will be the key code. And the key code for return would be 13. And if that's the case, we simply call our method we already implemented, create shopping list, like that. So again, when the document has finished loading, we put the cursor into the input text field, and then we also listen to the key up event, and if the user enters a key which will be return, so that just means if he presses return, we will create the new shopping list. So let's save that and test that. We reload the page, and as you can see, the cursor is already here, so I don't have to do anything with the mouse. I can just say test and hit return, and the list is already created. Do you feel the relief? You don't have to click anymore. Okay, now let's do the same thing for adding items to the shopping list. The code is actually quite similar. We just have to put it into the show shopping list method and switch the identifier of the text field. So we can copy this code here and then go up to our show shopping list method, and down here we paste it, change the name to new item name, do the same thing right here, and instead of creating a new shopping list now, when the user hits enter, we add the item. And last but not least, we want to remove the text when an item has been entered, so we can actually copy this line here, put it down here, and instead of getting the value, we actually want to set it to an empty string. Easy as that. Now let's test this again. Reload the page, maybe empty the cache, and create a new list. As you can see, the focus is now also in the text field for the new item. I can enter milk, return. Now I can again buy some cornflakes. You see, it works. So it is done. The front end is finished for now. So let's sum up what you have learned so far, and then we will turn to the backend and build our web API web service. You actually learned quite a lot in this section about the front end of your single page application. You've started with creating the project in Visual Studio and adding the necessary HTML and CSS files. This means you now know how to write different views for your application and make them a bit prettier with cascading style sheets. After that, you integrated jQuery into your web application project. This is a crucial part because with jQuery and JavaScript, you actually put intelligence into your web app. You have learned how to switch the views, create new JavaScript objects, and manipulate the DOM tree when the user clicks a button. Additionally to that, you made the user's life easier with implementing a little keyboard functionality, hence improving the usability. Great! Now it's time to actually build and call the web service. Now if you made it this far, you're definitely ready for the complete single page application with ASP.NET and jQuery hands-on course on Udemy. You seem to have what it takes to build a single page app completely by yourself from start to finish. In the next sections of this course, you will build the web service using ASP.NET Web API 2, you will save your data persistently in a SQL Server database with Entity Framework, and you will learn how to publish your web application on a Windows server with Internet Information Services. As a thank you and reward for completing the first section of this course, I want to give you a pretty sweet discount. Make sure to use the link in the video description below. I'm looking forward to seeing you again in the course.